In the crucible of the Pacific War, amid the suffocating heat of jungle warfare, where visibility measured mere yards and death lurked behind every fern-draped tree, one weapon emerged not merely as a tool of combat, but as an icon of psychological dominance, a mechanical harbinger that transformed the very nature of close-quarters battle across the bloodied islands of the South Pacific. This was not simply another firearm in humanity's endless catalogue of destruction. The Thompson represented a fundamental reimagining of infantry doctrine, a bridge between the bolt-action rifles of the 19th century and the assault rifles that would define the latter half of the 20th. In the dense, claustrophobic vegetation of Guadalcanal, New Georgia, Bougainville, and 100 other contested islands whose names are now inscribed in the annals of military history, the Thompson's rapid-fire capability proved devastatingly effective against an enemy whose own tactical doctrine emphasized surprise, aggression, and close-range assault. Japanese soldiers, trained in the fearsome tradition of Bushido and conditioned to execute night infiltrations and banzai charges with suicidal determination, encountered in the Thompson a weapon that could sweep entire sectors of jungle with lethal efficiency, turning their own tactics of shock and proximity into fatal vulnerabilities. The story of this weapon is inseparable from the larger narrative of the Second World War's Pacific theater, yet its origins reach back to the trenches of the First World War and forward to conflicts that would rage decades after VJ Day. It is a chronicle of visionary engineering, bureaucratic resistance, criminal notoriety, and ultimate vindication, a saga that encompasses gangland Chicago, contested atolls, and the jungles where empires collided in a struggle that would reshape the global order. The dawn of the 20th century witnessed a fundamental crisis in military arms development, a crisis born from the catastrophic lessons of the Great War and the recognition that existing weaponry had failed to address the brutal realities of modern combat. The First World War's trench warfare exposed with merciless clarity the inadequacies of bolt-action rifles in close-quarters combat. When soldiers went over the top and entered the nightmarish landscape of no man's land, when they descended into enemy trenches for the grim work of clearing fortified positions, the standard infantry rifle, regardless of its accuracy at range, became an unwieldy liability. A soldier armed with a Springfield or Lee Enfield could fire perhaps 15 aimed shots per minute under ideal conditions. But in the chaos of trench-to-trench fighting, where encounters occurred at arm's length in smoke-filled corridors of earth and sandbags, such weapons offered little advantage over the medieval pike. Military theorists and frontline officers alike recognized that a fundamental gap existed in the infantryman's arsenal. What the modern soldier required was a weapon combining the portability of a pistol with the firepower of a machine gun, something that could be wielded by a single combatant without the cumbersome tripods and water cooling systems that rendered existing automatic weapons positional rather than mobile. The machine gun, while devastating in defensive positions, remained tethered to fixed emplacements. The pistol, while portable, lacked stopping power and effective range. Between these extremes lay an unfilled tactical niche that cost thousands of lives in every major offensive of the Great War. The industrial landscape of the early 20th century presented both opportunities and constraints for weapons development. The United States, having entered the conflict relatively late, possessed manufacturing capabilities that had not been depleted by years of total war, yet American military doctrine remained conservative, skeptical of automatic weapons and wedded to the cult of aimed fire that had dominated tactical thinking since the days of the Indian Wars. European powers, bloodied by 4 years of mechanized slaughter, understood the need for innovation, but lacked the industrial capacity to pursue radical new designs while maintaining production of conventional arms. Germany had experimented with the Bergmann MP-18 in the war's final year, demonstrating the viability of a compact automatic weapon, but the Treaty of Versailles would soon prohibit such development, leaving the field open to other nations. Into this landscape of recognized need and frustrated innovation came a confluence of factors that would make the submachine gun not merely possible but inevitable: advances in metallurgy and precision manufacturing, the standardization of pistol cartridges, and perhaps most critically, the emergence of visionaries willing to challenge military orthodoxy. The world stood poised for a revolution in small arms, awaiting only the catalyst of individual genius to transform potential into reality. John Taliaferro Thompson emerged from the professional military establishment of the United States Army as a figure uniquely positioned to revolutionize infantry weapons. Born in 1860, Thompson had served as an ordnance officer, retiring with the rank of colonel after a distinguished career that included service during the Spanish-American War and extensive experience in weapons procurement and evaluation. His background provided him with both the technical knowledge to understand firearms engineering and the practical experience to recognize the deficiencies in existing military arsenals. Thompson possessed that rare combination of qualities essential to the transformative inventor: intimate familiarity with his field's limitations, the imagination to envision radical solutions, and the determination to pursue his vision despite institutional resistance. The catalyst for Thompson's most famous creation came during the First World War, when he observed the tactical paralysis imposed by trench warfare. He envisioned a weapon he called a trench broom, a portable, automatic firearm that could sweep enemy positions clean with overwhelming firepower. Thompson's vision extended beyond mere mechanical innovation. He understood that modern warfare demanded weapons adapted to new tactical realities, tools that would restore mobility and offensive capability to infantry forces, pinned down by machine gun fire and barbed wire. His concept challenged the prevailing military wisdom that emphasized marksmanship and individual aimed fire, proposing instead that volume of fire, delivered rapidly at close range, could prove decisively superior in the confined chaos of trench fighting. To realize this vision, Thompson partnered with Theodore Eichhoff, a talented engineer, and established the Auto Ordnance Corporation in 1916. The company faced immediate technical challenges that would have daunted lesser innovators. Existing automatic weapons relied on recoil or gas operation, mechanisms that proved complex, prone to fouling, and difficult to miniaturize. Thompson and his team explored an alternative principle: delayed blowback operation, utilizing the Blish lock, a friction-based delay system invented by Commander John Blish that theoretically allowed the weapon to fire from an unlocked breech while managing the pressures involved. Though the actual contribution of the Blish principle remains debated among firearms historians, many arguing that simple blowback and the weapon's substantial mass provided sufficient delay, the design philosophy represented innovative thinking applied to intractable problems. The development process consumed years and substantial capital. Thompson invested his personal fortune and attracted additional investors, but the work proceeded slowly, hampered by the precision manufacturing required and the iterative process of testing, failure, and refinement. Early prototypes demonstrated the concept's viability, but revealed numerous shortcomings: excessive weight feeding problems with early magazine designs, and manufacturing costs that threatened to render the weapon economically unfeasible. The team experimented with various calibers before settling on the .45 ACP cartridge, already standard in the U.S. military's M1911 pistol, a decision that offered logistical advantages and delivered formidable stopping power at the close ranges for which the weapon was intended. By the time Thompson's submachine gun neared production readiness, the armistice of 1918 had ended the war that inspired its creation. The weapon that might have revolutionized trench warfare arrived too late for its intended battlefield, a bitter irony that would force Thompson to seek markets beyond the military establishment that had been his career's foundation. Yet this temporal misfortune would not diminish the weapon's eventual impact. It merely delayed the Thompson's appointment with its destiny in jungles half a world away. The Thompson submachine gun that emerged from auto ordnance development efforts in 1919 represented a triumph of engineering ambition over practical economics, a weapon whose capabilities commanded admiration even as its price prohibited widespread adoption. The Model 1919 and its refined successor, the Model 1921, embodied Thompson's vision of portable automatic firepower. But they also reflected the manufacturing realities of precision-machined firearms in an era before mass production techniques had been perfected for complex automatic weapons. Each Thompson required extensive machining from solid steel forgings, with close tolerances necessary to ensure reliable function. The weapon's receiver, machined from a single block of steel, its carefully fitted components, and its hand-finished parts resulted in a firearm of exceptional quality and equally exceptional cost. The original Thompson design incorporated features that would become iconic: a horizontal foregrip mounted beneath the barrel, allowing the shooter to control the weapon's tendency to rise during automatic fire, a distinctive finned barrel that aided cooling during sustained fire, and most memorably, a drum magazine that could hold 50 or 100 rounds of .45 ACP ammunition. This drum magazine, while mechanically complex and prone to reliability issues, created an immediately recognizable silhouette that would become synonymous with the weapon itself. Alternative stick magazines holding 20 or 30 rounds offered greater reliability and reduced weight, but the drum's visual impact ensured its enduring association with the Thompson in popular imagination. The weapon's operating characteristics reflected its designer's tactical intentions. Firing from an open bolt at a cyclic rate of approximately 600 to 700 rounds per minute, the Thompson delivered controllable automatic fire that could be sustained in short bursts or extended volleys. The .45 ACP cartridge, while subsonic and limited in range compared to rifle rounds, provided devastating stopping power at close quarters, its heavy bullet delivering substantial energy transfer to any target it struck. The weapon's substantial weight, nearly 11 pounds empty, and significantly more when loaded with a full drum magazine, helped manage recoil and kept the muzzle steady during automatic fire, though this same weight presented challenges for extended carrying during infantry operations. Auto-ordnance commercial launch of the Thompson encountered immediate obstacles. The weapon's price, initially exceeding $200 at a time when quality rifles sold for a fraction of that amount, placed it beyond the reach of most potential military customers, particularly in the austere post-war budgets that characterized the 1920s. The United States military, while acknowledging the weapon's capabilities, ordered only modest quantities for evaluation and specialized use by the Marine Corps and Coast Guard. Foreign military forces expressed interest but balked at the cost. Thompson found himself with a revolutionary weapon, and virtually no market willing to pay for it. Desperate for sales, Auto Ordnance marketed the Thompson to civilian law enforcement agencies, which proved marginally more receptive. Police departments facing Prohibition-era crime adopted small numbers, but even this market remained limited. Then, in a development that would permanently alter the weapon's public image, criminal organizations discovered the Thompson. Gangsters found that a weapon designed for trench warfare proved equally effective for urban warfare between rival bootlegging operations. The Thompson's devastating firepower, combined with its portability, made it the preferred arm of organized crime during America's most violent criminal era. Bank robberies, mob assassinations, and the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929 indelibly linked the Thompson with gangland violence in the public consciousness, earning it the sobriquet Tommy Gun and associations that both enhanced its fearsome reputation and complicated its legitimate adoption. This period of criminal notoriety, while devastating to Thompson's original vision and personal reputation, paradoxically demonstrated the weapon's effectiveness under combat conditions, albeit criminal rather than military. By the late 1930s, as global tensions again mounted and military forces worldwide began rearming, the Thompson stood ready for re-evaluation, its capabilities proven if not yet vindicated. The Thompson submachine gun's true baptism occurred not in the trenches for which it had been designed, but in the dense, hostile jungles of the Pacific Theater, where American forces encountered an enemy whose tactical doctrine seemed specifically vulnerable to the weapon's capabilities. When Marines landed on Guadalcanal in August 1942, beginning the first major Allied offensive against Japanese forces, many carried Thompson's weapons that had finally been ordered in substantial quantities as the United States mobilized for global war. What followed in those steaming jungles would transform the Thompson from a promising but unproven design into a legendary instrument of close-quarters combat. The jungle environment presented challenges that conventional bolt-action rifles could barely address. Visibility rarely exceeded 20 yards. Often it measured mere feet through the interlocking vegetation. Sound became distorted, direction uncertain. The Japanese, masters of infiltration and camouflage, excelled at sudden ambushes and night attacks that brought combat to knife-fighting range. Under such conditions, a Marine armed with an M1903 Springfield rifle might fire a single shot before an enemy soldier closed within bayonet range. The Thompson operator, by contrast, could sweep an entire sector with 30 rounds in seconds, transforming uncertainty about enemy positions into a lethal solution that covered wide arcs of jungle with chattering automatic fire. The weapon's psychological impact proved as significant as its tactical effectiveness. The Thompson's distinctive sound, a rapid staccato bark, utterly unlike the crack of rifles, or the sustained roar of belt-fed machine guns, announced its presence across the jungle canopy. Japanese soldiers who survived encounters with Thompson-armed Marines reported to their commanders that American forces possessed overwhelming automatic weapons at the squad level, an assessment that inflated American firepower in enemy calculations and contributed to a growing sense among Japanese troops that they faced not merely numerical superiority but technological dominance. This psychological dimension manifested most dramatically during Japanese banzai charges and infiltration attacks, when the sound of multiple Thompsons opening fire simultaneously could break even fanatical attacks through sheer volume of fire and the visible devastation it wrought. Combat narratives from Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and subsequent island campaigns consistently emphasized the Thompson's value in the specific circumstances of Pacific jungle warfare. Marine raiders and Army infantry scouts, operating in small patrols deep in enemy-controlled territory, relied on Thompsons for their combination of firepower and relative compactness. The weapon proved especially valuable for point men and for clearing Japanese bunkers and cave complexes, where the .45 caliber round's stopping power at extremely close range, often measured in yards, rendered enemy soldiers immediately incapacitated rather than merely wounded. The Thompson's limitations, its weight, limited magazine capacity compared to belt-fed weapons, and reduced effectiveness beyond 100 yards, mattered less in jungle fighting than they might have in more open terrain. One particular engagement on New Georgia illustrated the Thompson's psychological and tactical impact with stark clarity. A company of American soldiers pinned down by Japanese forces occupying fortified positions in dense jungle had suffered casualties throughout the day from invisible attackers who fired from concealment and then withdrew before return fire could be directed effectively. As darkness approached, threatening a night infiltration that might overwhelm the American position, the company commander redistributed his Thompson submachine guns to his most reliable veterans and positioned them in the likely avenues of enemy approach. When the expected Japanese night attack came, moving with characteristic stealth and discipline through the undergrowth, the Americans held fire until the enemy had committed fully to their assault. At near point-blank range, the Thompsons opened in concert, their combined fire creating an impenetrable wall of lead that shattered the attack within seconds. The psychological shock of encountering such concentrated firepower at close quarters broke the Japanese assault entirely. Survivors withdrew in disorder, and no second attack materialized. Word of such engagement spread through both American and Japanese forces, establishing the Thompson's reputation as the dominant weapon of jungle warfare. The weapon was not without shortcomings, even in its ideal environment. The Thompson's weight became burdensome during extended patrols in tropical heat. Its magazines, particularly the complex drum designs, proved vulnerable to damage and fouling from the omnipresent mud and humidity. Ammunition supply challenges emerged as Thompson-armed units consumed rounds at rates that strained logistics systems designed for bolt-action rifles. Yet these practical difficulties never diminished the weapon's tactical value or the fierce loyalty it inspired among those who carried it into combat. The exigencies of global warfare demanded rapid expansion of Thompson production and prompted engineering modifications that balanced manufacturing efficiency against combat effectiveness. As American industry mobilized for total war, the Thompson's complex machining and hand-fitting requirements presented bottlenecks that threatened to limit availability precisely when demand surged. Auto Ordnance and its licensed manufacturers, including Savage Arms, responded by developing simplified variants that retained essential functionality while dramatically reducing manufacturing time and cost. The M1928-01, standardized by the military in the war's early years, eliminated some of the original model's more complex features, while maintaining the weapon's core capabilities. More dramatically, the M1 Thompson, introduced in 1942, represented a fundamental redesign that sacrificed the Blish lock entirely in favor of simple blowback operation, removed the capability to accept drum magazines, eliminated the finned barrel and distinctive foregrip in favor of more conventional furniture, and reduced the weapon's parts count and manufacturing time by nearly half. The subsequent M1A1 variant simplified the design further, incorporating a fixed firing pin and other minor modifications. These simplified Thompsons sacrificed some of the original weapon's refinement and aesthetic appeal, but achieved the critical goal of putting effective submachine guns into soldiers' hands in adequate numbers. Beyond American service, the Thompson found users across the Allied coalition and in conflicts that spanned the globe's geography and political landscape. British and Commonwealth forces received substantial numbers through Lend-Lease arrangements, employing Thompsons in Europe, North Africa, and Asia. British commandos and special operations executive operatives valued the weapon for clandestine operations and raids where close-range firepower proved essential. Free French forces, Soviet units, Chinese nationalist armies, and resistance movements throughout occupied Europe all incorporated Thompsons into their arsenals, each adapting the weapon to their particular tactical requirements and operational environments. The European theatre presented different challenges than the Pacific jungles, in the hedgerows of Normandy, among the ruins of Italian cities, and during house-to-house fighting across France and Germany, the Thompson again demonstrated its value in close-quarters combat. Paratroopers favored the weapon for its compact firepower, accepting its weight as the price for capability upon landing in contested drop zones. Tank crews carried Thompsons for close-in defense, recognizing that armor provided no protection once forced to abandon their vehicles. Military police, rear area security forces, and officers seeking personal protection all found uses for the versatile submachine gun. The weapon's service extended beyond conventional military operations into the shadowy world of special operations and clandestine warfare. The Office of Strategic Services, precursor to the Central Intelligence Agency, supplied Thompsons to partisan groups and resistance fighters, recognizing that the weapon's ease of use and devastating effect at close range made it ideal for ambushes, assassinations, and guerrilla operations. These covert applications, while numerically minor compared to frontline military use, established patterns that would persist through subsequent Cold War conflicts. Manufacturing statistics reflected the Thompson's wartime importance. Approximately 1.5 million units were produced during the Second World War, a remarkable figure, considering the weapon's initial commercial failure, and representing one of the most dramatic reversals of fortune in arms development history. This production occurred across multiple facilities, involved thousands of workers, and required allocation of strategic materials and machine tools that might otherwise have been directed toward other weapon systems, evidence of the military's commitment to providing submachine guns to forces engaged in close-quarters combat. By war's end, military analysts recognized that the Thompson, despite its combat effectiveness, represented a transitional design whose time was passing. The weapon's weight, manufacturing complexity even in simplified form, and the limitations inherent in pistol-caliber cartridges pointed toward new developments. The German Sturmgewehr, firing an intermediate power cartridge, demonstrated that future infantry weapons would bridge the gap between submachine guns and rifles, offering automatic fire capability at extended ranges. American development of the M2 carbine, lighter and cheaper than the Thompson, while offering selective fire, suggested that submachine guns as a category faced obsolescence. Yet the Thompson's retirement from American military service proved protracted rather than abrupt, and its life in combat extended decades beyond its official replacement. The weapon remained in frontline service through the Korean War, where its cold-weather reliability and familiar handling endeared it to soldiers and Marines who trusted proven designs over newer alternatives. In Korea's mountainous terrain and during brutal winter campaigns, the Thompson's robust construction withstood environmental extremes that disabled more complex weapons. Veterans of the Pacific War, now serving in a new Asian conflict, often deliberately retained their Thompsons despite official issue of M2 carbines, trusting experience over regulations. The Vietnam War witnessed the Thompson's final significant use by American forces, primarily among South Vietnamese units equipped with surplus weapons, and by some American advisors who valued its stopping power. More remarkably, Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces captured and employed Thompsons throughout the conflict, valuing any automatic weapon despite the challenges of maintaining obsolescent arms and securing non-standard ammunition. French forces had left substantial numbers in Indochina following their withdrawal, and these weapons circulated through the region's conflicts for decades. Beyond formal military channels, the Thompson found new life in the hands of irregular forces, insurgencies, and government security services across the developing world. Post-colonial conflicts in Africa and Asia saw Thompsons appear alongside more modern weapons, the submachine gun's durability, ensuring functionality decades after manufacture. Its presence in Cold War proxy conflicts from Central America to Southeast Asia testified to both its widespread wartime distribution and its continued utility in environments where technological sophistication mattered less than reliability and firepower. Criminal and paramilitary organizations also perpetuated the Thompson's active service. From the partition violence in India to the Troubles in Northern Ireland, from organized crime in post-war Europe to drug cartels in Latin America, the weapon appeared wherever armed groups sought automatic firepower. This continued criminal association, echoing the Thompson's Prohibition-era notoriety, ensured its presence in law enforcement arsenals as well, creating the paradox of Thompsons serving both sides of legal confrontations well into the 1970s. The weapon's longevity reflected not merely widespread distribution, but genuine design merit. The Thompson's simple operating principle, robust construction, and tolerance for poor maintenance enabled functionality under circumstances that would disable more sophisticated arms. In remote regions lacking armories and trained armorers, where ammunition quality varied and maintenance consisted of field-expedient repairs, the Thompson continued serving because it could continue functioning. This practical durability, originally an accidental byproduct of the weapon's overbuilt construction, became its defining characteristic in the twilight decades of its operational life. The Thompson submachine gun occupies a unique position in military history, transcending its functional role as an instrument of war to become a cultural icon and symbol of an entire era of armed conflict. Its image, instantly recognizable across generations, appears in film, literature, and popular culture with a frequency that few weapons achieve, representing not merely a tool but an archetype, the embodiment of close-quarters combat, rapid firepower, and the violent conflicts that shaped the 20th century. This cultural resonance stems partly from the weapon's distinctive appearance, and partly from its association with pivotal historical moments: gangland Chicago, Pacific Island campaigns, and guerrilla struggles across the decolonizing world. From a technical perspective, the Thompson's legacy lies in its demonstration that submachine guns constituted a viable infantry weapon category worthy of development and production, despite institutional skepticism. Though the specific design proved too expensive and heavy for universal adoption, it established doctrinal foundations that influenced all subsequent automatic weapons development. The concept of providing squad-level automatic firepower, of accepting weight and ammunition expenditure as trade-offs for tactical flexibility, became standard military thinking because the Thompson proved these concepts valid under combat conditions. Later submachine guns and assault rifles refined the Thompson's fundamental proposition rather than rejecting it. The weapon's influence extended beyond military spheres into political and social realms. The Thompson became synonymous with both legitimate authority and criminal violence, with liberation movements and oppressive regimes, with ordered society's defenders and its challengers. This duality reflects the fundamental neutrality of tools, a reminder that weapons themselves possess no moral character, acquiring meaning only through the purposes to which they are employed. The same Thompson that defended Marines on Guadalcanal armed gangsters in Chicago, the same design that fought tyranny in occupied Europe equipped authoritarian regimes in post-colonial conflicts. For those who carried it in combat, the Thompson inspired a fierce loyalty that transcended rational analysis of its objective characteristics. Veterans spoke of the weapon with affection bordering on reverence, remembering not its statistical performance, but the psychological comfort of its weight in their hands during desperate engagements, the confidence its presence provided during night watches in hostile territory, and the comrades whose survival it ensured through devastating firepower at critical moments. This emotional connection between soldier and weapon, forged in the extremity of combat, represents the Thompson's truest legacy, not its technical specifications or production numbers, but its role in the human experience of war. The Pacific theater battles where the Thompson earned its reputation have faded from living memory as the generations who fought there pass into history. Yet the weapon remains present in American consciousness, a tangible artifact of conflicts that defined national identity and global order. Museums display Thompsons alongside the uniforms and equipment of the soldiers who carried them. Collectors preserve functioning examples as mechanical art. Historians analyze its development and deployment, and popular culture continues recycling its image as shorthand for armed conflict itself. In this persistence of memory and meaning, the Thompson transcends its material existence as metal and wood, becoming instead a symbol of industrial warfare, American military history, and the enduring human capacity to create tools of extraordinary lethality in service of survival, victory, and the protection of ideals worth defending at any cost.